Okay, so welcome to the next session of change management, and here we will continue our discussion on the nature of change management. So, earlier we have discussed what are the triggers of change, what are the impact of the change, and why it is important for us to manage change effectively. And I also presented a case of .com companies which did not survive, right, which basically presents a point and a case to understand the dynamics of change management. Now, we take it further to see that how the change management has been perceived and what are the major milestones in studies and the development of change management. So, what we are going to present here is something which basically helps you to understand the process of change management, and if you look back at the time, this presents major milestones of work that has been done in the area of change management and what they have suggested related to change management, right. So, we start with this, the first one, that is age of discontinuity. Okay. Peter Drucker, who started gave this concept of age of discontinuity in 1968, and he suggested that the change the forces of the change is going to disrupt our life. Way back in 1968, you can say almost 50 years back, he suggested that the changes or the forces of the change are going to disturb our life and our work and our organizations. And he said that we are living in an age of discontinuity. Moving further, Alvin Toffler wrote a book in 1970 which is known as Future Shock. And he, in this book, he basically identified and described the kind of things which is likely to happen in future, and he say that they are going to provide a big shock to the organizations and the individuals. And he suggested that this future shock is a result of the speed of change which is happening and how these changes are going to affect the technology and culture. So, if at the first place, the first point that was made by Drucker, that yes, change is going to disturb us. The second point which was made by Toffler in Future Shock is related to what he call the speed of change, that the rate at which the change is happening is very fast, which is you can see visible from the changes in technology. If you look at the product life cycle, it has reduced to 6 to 7 months, in some area it is even less than that. So, this accelerating speed of change which is happening in the field of technology and in culture also, a lot of changes are happening in the culture. So, these are the new things that is coming up, which is going to provide some kind of shock, and if you are not able to bear this shock, then you as a organization is not going to survive and grow tomorrow. So, these are the two major developments in the history that you can look at it related to the change. Then moving further, in 17, Derek Abel, who basically talked about the strategy, that what kind of a strategy has been used by organizations to grow and develop, right. And he said that there is nothing called a permanent strategy, and the same strategy is going to be useful, and you are going to use with the same strategy and be successful. So, he suggested and advocated that you adopt a strategy, and if you find that the strategy is not working anymore, then you give up that strategy, go for a new strategy. So, basically he talks about the changes in the strategy. See, if you look at Toffler, he talked about change in the technology and culture, while Abel talked about the change in the strategy. So, he says that you need to bring about a change in your action plan, because if you continue to use your old action plan or old strategy, you might not be successful. So, he said that okay, you use a strategy, if it is successful you continue with that one, if you find that it is no more useful, then you bring about a change in your strategy. Then another concept which was given by Noel Tussey in 1983, which is known as beings of habit. What does it mean? It means that what he suggests as per his concept of this being of habit is that we continue to do work in a certain manner. So, we develop certain patterns and trends, right, which we call habit. So, what actually happens? We repeat those things and do the same thing in the similar way, right. So, this is what we know as habits, because if you are continuing to do the things in a similar way, then it becomes a part of our habit. So, he said that we all have habits and we tend to repeat it the same no matter whatever changes. So, if you continue to do the same thing, then probably you will not be able to survive. So, you need to bring about a change in the way you have been doing things. So, this talks about the change in the process. So, if you look at what is coming out from the past is that you need to bring about change in your structure, in your technology, your culture, your strategy, and here we are talking about change in the process. Because if you have adopted certain processes and keep on doing same thing to produce something, okay, and if you are keep on producing the same thing time and again, then maybe tomorrow you will not be able to compete in the market with the same products and services. Now, if you look at some of the companies, I will give an example like say HMT, they keep on producing mechanical watches, though they started and also entered into quartz watches, that were not successful because they did not diversify. They keep on doing the same things in a similar way, though they had the technology, they had good engineers, they had good processes, but they did not go for innovations and change, and that they keep on doing the similar things. So, they did not change. So, you need to diversify, innovate, so that you are able to survive in the market. Look at the case of say Hindustan Motors. Okay. They did not go for any kind of a diversification in their products and offerings. So, what happened? It has ceased to exist today, because you will not find these vehicles are being manufactured anymore, because the company has been closed. It means, if you do not change yourself, means that the way you have been doing certain things to produce certain outcome, then this is what going to happen, right. So, beings of habit need to be changed. Then another concept that came is like celebrating your successes for a longer period. Now, if you look at either Hindustan Motors or HMT, they have long term successes to their credit, which they try to capitalize. But what happens later on? You cannot capitalize on your success for a very longer period, right, because this success for a longer period may bring about certain failures at a later stage if you do not change, right. So, the concept that he gave is nothing feels like success, because you cannot rely and depend upon your past success for the future. So, what Pascal suggested in 1990, that businesses need to continuously invent something new to be successful, right. So, change is inevitable, right. So, he talks about new products and services that you need to bring out in order to survive and grow, right. Now, the another term which was given by Peter Schwartz was known as occurrence evaluation. What is occurrence evaluation? Occurrence evaluation means that whatever is happening, you need to evaluate and see the impact, right. So, you need to monitor the situation, okay. You need to plan things in a very proper way and see that whether things are going it as per the plan or not. And you need to continuously monitor the situation, so that you are successful. Suppose you have planned something today and you are not able to monitor it properly, that how it is working, then what will happen? That is one thing. Second thing that he suggested, that if you are going for strategic planning, I mean you have planned your strategies very well, okay, but you have not considered the situation, right, then it is not going to be successful. So, basically he talks about the relationship between the environment and the strategy. So, he suggests that your strategy should be derived by an evaluation of what is happening around, that is occurrence, that is happening around in your internal and external environment. So, when you are going for strategic planning, you need to do it on the basis of the current situation, that is what is happening in your internal as well as external environment. And if you are able to properly assess, then you can move forward and bring about a successful change. And if it is not based on the assessment of the situation, then you may not be successful. So, what he suggests is that you need to be very very careful, assess the environment, scan it properly, identify what is happening around, and then based on that those situations go for strategic planning. Okay. But he also suggested that if you are going to act or change on the basis of your plan, it would be good, but make sure that it is contingent upon the evaluation of what is happening around. Now, if you look at the Pascal and Schwarz in early 90s, what late 90s, what they suggest? They suggest that you need to go through this process of innovation in your product and services, and also you need to bring about a change in the way you have been doing, and it should be dependent upon the environment in which you are operating in, right. So, now if you look at these concepts that we have been talking about, it gives you an idea about the kind of changes that is happening in the organization. Like we are talking about changes in the process, system, structure, technology, and that is how we can better understand the change management. Now, if you look at further in 1996, Sliwodzki actually talked about can we predict about the future or not, and he identified this concept which is known as strategic anticipations. He suggests that yes, we can predict the future by evaluating the current situation. So, moving further, what Schwarz has suggested, the strategic planning, he said that yes, if we are going to plan about the future, then you must evaluate your current situation, and all changes should be based upon your evaluation or assessment of the current situation. So, you should be very very careful in assessing the current situation, and then you go for some change. Okay. So, he says that yes, we can predict the future, because if provided we are able to identify the level of uncertainty that is associated with this one, with the current situation, right, because you know that we have defined change as moving from the current state to future state. So, future state can be predicted effectively only if you are able to understand the current state very clearly, and at the same time you look at your internal strength, and you also look at the environment, and based on the analysis then you develop your strategies, so that you can implement them to be successful. A year after, in 1997, Christensen talked about a term which is very very known today, is known as disruptive technology. What is disruptive technology? It talks about a change in the technology which is very very different. It means the way you have been doing or operating or producing goods and services has changed, right. He says that people adopt to those changes which are continuous in nature, because sometimes we try to bring about changes which could be incremental in nature. But he talks about a concept which is known as disruptive technology, and he says that this technology is something that is different. The concept of disruptive technology is that a technology which did not exist earlier, right. Now, if you look at some of the things that is associated with this disruptive technology, it means this kind of technology might help you to change yourself effectively, but the major problem with this technology is to understand how this technology is going to impact the organizations. Okay. Because sometimes we go for adopting this kind of technology and we are not successful, because we are not in a position, you can say, to understand how to adopt this kind of technology, right. So, this disruptive technology is something that is very very different, very very radical technology. It means it is different from the current technologies that we have been using. For example, now most of the organizations are using, say, artificial intelligence or machine learning, which could be examples of disruptive technology. This kind of technology did not exist, and these kind of technologies are going to replace the older technologies. So, most of the organizations need to adopt these kind of technologies to make effective decisions, to perform effectively, right, and that is why we have been talking about here this disruptive technology. next, another term which was given by Gary Hamel in 2000, this is known as strategic decay, right. What does he suggest here? He says no matter how brilliant the idea is, it is older after some time. It means that he basically augments and supplements earlier thing where we talked about strategic anticipation, that yes, you need to keep on changing your strategy. So, he said that organizations need to continuously change their strategy, because any strategy after some time decays, it is not going to be effective, because your competitors may also adapt to the same strategy. So, you need to bring about some kind of innovations in the way you are going to you make use of your strategy, or the way you are going to develop a new strategy, right. And finally, if you look at the present date is the current environment, it is basically coined as the term what we call complexity theory. What does it mean to say complexity theory? Now, if you look at the complexity, it means that today's the things have become more complex. How things become more complex? When you add so many things together. It means the business environment has become complex, the technology has become complex, the way people have been working are complex. So, there are multiple agents related to different stakeholders related to the environment, businesses, organizations, all are working together, and if that happens, then the environment of the organization become very complex. So, working in a very complex environment where everything is changing very fast and they keep on interacting very fast. So, the two factors which are related to complexity, that those factors which are going to impact your organization are many, and these factors are very dynamic. So, if all those factors which are dynamic means that they keep on changing very fast. So, the frequency of change is very fast, and the second thing is that there are a number of environmental factors which are going to influence your organization. So, if there are a number of factors which are going to influence your organization and all of them are very dynamic, then as a result it creates a situation which is going to be very complex. So, analyzing this complex environment is the job of the management, and see that what kind of changes they need to bring about to cope up with this kind of challenge. So, most of the businesses today are going to work in a very complex environment because of the nature of interaction that is happening and the nature of dynamism among these factors that is there. It has become very say different for the companies to work in a complex business environment, right. So, and this is growing again, and that is why it is said that yes, we are going to live in an age which is going to be very complex, and the same can be said about the organizations. Now, the basic idea of discussing these concepts was to see that what has emerged out here. Basically, this talks about the changes that is happening in the environment, how environment has become complex, do we need to follow the same strategy to change or not, how technology, structure, system, culture and processes are changing. So, this gives you an idea about the kind of changes which is happening in the organization, right. So, most of these authors basically advocate what is happening in and around in the name of the change, right. So, that you give an idea that what is change, what is happening in the name of the change management and what is changing, whether there is a change in the technology, whether change in the environment making it more complex, whether the strategy that you have adopted is working or not, whether the culture change is happening, whether the processes, the way you have been doing things have been changing or not, or is there a need to change your process, the way of doing businesses have been changed or not, right. So, all these are reflections to better understand the dynamics of the change management. Okay. Now, the next stage what we will do, we will take up certain examples to explain that how change management is being taken up by the organizations and how the experiences of the organizations have been related to the change management. So, we will take some examples, some Indian companies as well as some other companies to explain that how companies have been experiencing success or failures in the event of change that is going around. So, we will look at some of the examples related to the success and failures, because see how this change is being interpreted. Okay. So, if you look at the reflections that has come from the past, they are going to help us to interpret change in terms of culture, technology, system, process, strategy, whatever it is, and how the change is being interpreted by the change managers, that is very important, right. So, the idea of giving these examples to see that what change means to different people, because it means different things to different people, but this interpretation of the change is very important, because if this interpretation is going to guide and help you to decide about what kind of change you want to bring in the organization. So, you will use certain stories of change, which basically reflects a wider range of issues which affect why and how change happens in the organization. So, we will take up these examples one by one to explain these changes. Now, the first example that I have taken with Nokia, you know that Nokia is a company which you know that started way back in 1865. It was a paper and pulp company, but it basically evolved into a mobile technology company, mobile communication equipment in 1992. They went for this strategy and they basically focused on telecommunication, and if you look at the turnover, it was very good up to 2008 they have been growing, but after that there was a decline in their profit. Okay. There was intense competition from Apple and Samsung, because the kind of technology that was brought in was different, and that is why you will find that Nokia was not able to succeed with these giants, and the profit went down like anything. Then again now Nokia has adopted this window phone operating system and has again come back and trying to research and emerge in the market. So, if you look at this story of Nokia, which what does it suggest? That you should not focus on a particular strategy, right, because the kind of technology that they have been using, okay, they did not go for a change unless there was a fall in the profit. So, they learned it from that, and then when they faced intense competition from Apple and Samsung, they tried to bring about a new technology and they went for a change, and now they are trying to develop themselves. Another story which is very common with Titan versus HMT. Okay. You know that HMT had a monopoly in the market so far as watches were concerned. It is a subsidiary of Hindustan Machine Tools, and what happened to HMT at a later stage? They started losing market share due to mechanical and quartz watches, because you know that HMT was making mechanical watches and Titan was into quartz, right. But HMT did not go for innovations and diversifications in their products. With the change of the time, there was change in the customers' expectations and the preferences so far as watch was concerned, right. It became a fashion accessory for both men and women. It was not only considered as a timekeeping instrument, that is what was considered by HMT. So, and aesthetics played a very important role in marketing, and that is where HMT failed. Okay. And Tata in association with Quartz came out with a diversified product range, and it was very successful. So, what does it suggest? The lesson is that yes, innovation is the key to the success. If you are not able to innovate your products and services, you are not going to succeed. And if you look at some of the lessons that we have learned from the reflections of the past, one thing that is suggested by these authors, that yes, you need to invent your product and services in order to survive and grow and compete in the market, right. We will take up some other examples like Hewlett Packard, right. What were the issues that were there in the beginning? Okay. In those two different companies, okay, there was a lot of actually politics and lobbying that were going on between Hewlett and Packard. Okay. The most important challenge that they faced was related to the mergers of these two companies. It was related to the culture, because these two companies had altogether different cultures actually. So, there was no cultural adjustments, or you can say compatibility between these two companies. Okay. And then the new CEO tried to see that what needs to be done in order to bring about an effective and successful merger because merger is also a kind of change. Okay. So, he tried to communicate with the employees and other stakeholders to see what needs to be done in order to see that this merger is going to be successful. Okay. And another thing that was done, they went for restructuring, okay, which really helped this organization to grow and develop themselves. So, what are the key lessons that was learned from this story or this you can say example? Yes, see, when two companies are merging, people from two companies may be having different interests and needs that need to be recognized and addressed, because if you are not able to address these issues, people from two companies have different kind of expectations and interests. So, that need to be looked into by the top management. Okay. And negotiation and persuasion is very important. So, you need to continuously negotiate with the stakeholders, communicate effectively. Communicate effectively is the only thing that you can say is going to help you to touch the people, because unless you communicate with all the stakeholders, especially employees who are going to merge with your company, they are not going to be successful, right. And then the change, the pressure for change was there from both sides, outside as well as inside, and the company went for restructuring to become successful. So, it could be a success story where the companies try to bring about a change or at least accommodate the cultures of two different companies together through persuasion and negotiation, and they adopted communication strategy by touching the lives of the people and their heart to win them, so that they could be moving to a more successful merger. Apart from Hewlett Packard, we will take up some other example, like case of IBM. IBM is a very big company, right, and they started change which could be called as top down. Look, it means that the change were initiated from the top as well as also from the bottom. Okay. And lot of changes were initiated by CEO, which could be termed as transformational, not incremental in nature, right. And he also went for innovative changes, and the idea of innovative changes came from the employees which were working at the lower level in the organization. Okay. And those who came out with needs, okay, that we have to go for this kind of thing, okay, they also got support from the management. It means that suppose you have a new idea which is going to help the organization. Okay. So, there are innovation champions, okay, who take up your cause to support you, bring it to the top management to ensure that this idea is implemented, right. And in order to bring about the change, you need the company ensured that there are enough resources, so that these changes could be successfully implemented. Okay. And they went for both incremental changes and transformational changes in the organization. Now, there is another story of Kodak, which is not a success story, but it could be called a failure story, right. So, they went for basically reactive changes. You know that Kodak is a film company, they diversified into cameras, different kind of cameras, but what actually happened with the Kodak, that it did not keep pace with the changes which were happening in the technology in the field of communication, right. So, both the internal stakeholders, the employees and also the stakeholders, external stakeholders, they interpreted and reacted to the changes differently. Okay. Though they tried to bring about certain changes, but since Kodak initially was a very successful company, they relied on their past, and they did not see that yes, they need to bring about new technologies, because the kind of technology which was used by Kodak was more mechanical or manual technology, and you know that the technology related to the camera moved to become more digital in nature, and when it moved to become more digital in nature, what actually happened, that Kodak did not bring about these changes. Okay. And then they were basically more self interest, they were concerned about their own concern, that yes, how the company, how it is going to affect me, and they went for downsizing, right sizing, cutting staff and all kind of things, but they did not go for bringing about a change in the technology, and that is why this was not a very successful story, and that is how Kodak lost its market share and other kind of things. Now, apart from Kodak, I will also give you another example, which is from the food technology or the food, that is McDonald. McDonald actually is a company which went for a change for a different reason, right. You know that McDonald as an organization is producing food, right, not exactly food, but fast food you can say, and they actually went for a change because there was a lot of pressure from the external environment. Okay. Because the kind of junk food or fast food which were they preparing was not good for the health. Okay. So, as an organization you are also going to consider that yes, you have social responsibility towards the society, you also need to take care that how your product is going to affect the health of the people. Okay. Though they have planned their things very well, they went for the product and it was very successful, but initially, but what happened? There was a lot of opposition, and even there was a movie which is known as Super Size Me, which was made to show that how this junk food is going to affect the health of the people. If you look at this movie, which is easily available, you can see that a person who took this food almost for a month who was very healthy, and then when he went for a physical checkup, then on all parameters, whether it is the blood sugar or that is the blood pressure or heart related problems, all kind of problems he faced. So, he made this movie and this movie was very successful, and this movie basically acted as a pressure for the company, and that is how the McDonald went for a change. So, the key lessons that could be learned from this is that yes, change occur in a competitive international business environment. Yes, you have external pressure to change because you need to provide socially responsible products and services. You cannot play with the health of the people, and you sometimes you bring about certain changes, but it does not bring about intended changes. So, you have planned certain things, but you are not able to do because there is external pressure to come out with something which is going to be more useful from the utilistic perspective, right. And that is how company was forced to bring about significant changes in line with the environmental pressures. And what actually happened, that because of this the company also started offering health products, food products which are more healthy, which was good for the people. Now, the basic idea of bringing about these examples to you, which are related to both success and failure, to see that the factors that we have identified from the reflections. Okay. If you are able to scan the environment and identify what you need to do, you are going to succeed. If you are not able to scan the environment properly, like in case of say Kodak or Nokia, there is going to be a fall in your market share, in your performance and all kind of things. So, unless you are able to scan the environment effectively and see what is happening in and around, and accordingly you bring about a change in your structure, system, technology, process or culture, you are not going to be successful. And the trigger for the change comes from where? The environment. So, there could be environmental pressure for you to change, there could be internal pressure for you to change. Okay. So, you need to identify those pressures and work accordingly, so that you are going to effectively manage your change. So, I think with this we are going to complete this session. Thank you very much.